So today we're talking about how to prevent blisters from spoiling your multi-day hike. Now, this is such an important topic. If you've been on any sort of hike, you know that your feet are the most important tool in your gear list to be able to get you from A to B. And if you're like me and you've had some issues with your feet in the past, it's so important going on a multi-day trip on what we can do to be able to make sure that your feet are blister-free. Or if you do get a blister, you're able to manage it very efficiently so it's not sidetracking anything further in your hike. So when we were looking for a partner to present and present and also to prepare some content around foot care and blister prevention, we came across Rebecca. And what we loved about Rebecca is the focus on prevention, because it's not just about managing once you have a blister. It's all about how can we make sure that it doesn't happen to begin with. So I'm from the Hiking Club, and I'm excited to present this first topic in our webinar series. And really the star of the show is Rebecca. So I'm going to do a little bit of a formal introduction to Rebecca before she jumps in and presents her content, because she is such an industry expert, and I think it's important that we put that up front. So Rebecca is a podiatrist with 30 years experience who lives in Esperance, Western Australia. She has a special interest in the cause, prevention and treatment of foot friction blisters, which stems from her own persistent blister struggles and culmination many years in the popular Blister Prevention website. Rebecca is considered a leader in her field. She's authored journal articles and educated many podiatrists and sport medicine professionals on blister management. She provides foot care at six-day ultra marathons and loves to help people on all active pursuits to understand their blisters better and find effective solutions that they can rely on. So I'm excited to pass over to Rebecca, and she's going to take us through everything around blister prevention.
Wonderful. Okay, so we need to present. Bear with me, guys. There. How does that look?
Perfect.
All right. Well, thank you, Susan. I really appreciate the invite, and it's a pleasure to be here. And it's a pleasure to talk to everyone about what's new in blisters and what successful and reliable blister prevention looks like, and how to implement meaningful blister treatment. So there's heaps that I want to tell you about and show you, so we better make a start. I really don't need to go through this. We've done that. We're going to learn about what really causes blisters, because this is the most misunderstood part of blister management. Now, you can imagine if we don't really have the handle of what causes blisters, how on earth can we expect those strategies that we implement to actually fix the problem? And that's why things are all a bit off. So we're going to have a look at what really causes blisters, how to predict blisters, preventing and treating blisters, and we're going to go through some items that you should consider adding to your pack. Here are a few examples. In hiking, the most common are probably the back of heel blisters, and even that top right little pinch blister on the little toe, and also top middle, those edge blisters of the ball of the foot are also quite common. Taping historically has been one of our go-tos in terms of preventing blisters. It helps sometimes for some people. For people like me, it doesn't actually do enough to keep me blister free. So this is where it all started. I mean, if you think that blisters are caused by rubbing on the skin, taping intuitively will fix the problem 100%, because you're literally not making anything rub on the skin. However, you're about to find out that that may not be the case. Let's have a look at some stats. How common are blisters? They're the most common injury in hiking, bar none. If we look at some research, 29% of long distance hikers in Vermont got blisters, 48% during a 21K cross country hike, 73% of the 2011 Sydney episode of Oxfam Trail Walker needed medical attention for blisters, and 95% of college students in Korea on a 580k road hike got blisters. So that's a lot of blisters. Research also shows that they're twice as common as acute joint pain, 3 times more common as back pain, Achilles tendon pain and cramping, 4 times more common than tendinitis, and 6 times than ankle sprains. That 580k road hike in Korean university students, this was the blister incidence per day. It was a 21-day hike, and day 2 was the big day for blisters. So really the key here is you've got to baby your feet through those first few days to, rather than sort of, you know, just head off all gung-ho, really hone in and be especially careful during those first few days. Stop if you feel a hot spot and all that kind of stuff. The last reason why you should really give consideration to preventing blisters is that research shows that foot blisters make you 50% more likely to experience an additional musculoskeletal injury, so a knee injury or an ankle injury or a hip injury. So yeah, they are worth nipping in the bud. And I'm here to tell you that the good news is there is a way to beat the blister odds, no matter what kind of hiking you do, no matter how many days your hike goes for, no matter what the terrain, no matter whether it's hot, cold, wet or dry. There is definitely a way of preventing blisters, even if you're blister prone like me. You can think of this blister proneness has been demonstrated in experimental blister studies. So there's a big range of when the same force or load is applied to the skin, blisters occur at different times in that during that load application. So there's a big variation, and you know, it just like anything, it exists on a bit of a spectrum or a continuum. Cause, the most important part. Now, guys, I want you to do this with me so that I can really help you understand what causes blisters. If you get the fingertip of your right hand and put it on the back of your left hand, I want you to move your finger up and down on the back of your hand, but keep that fingertip stuck to the same bit of skin on the back of your hand. Now, what you'll notice is there's sort of bending and stretching of the skin on the back of your hand. This is what we call shear distortion, or just shear for short. Shear is the stretching and bending of skin and soft tissue between the bone of the back of your hand and the surface of the skin of the back of your hand. That is what causes blisters. If you do the same thing, now remember we're keeping the fingertip stuck to the back of your hand, there's nothing actually rubbing against the skin. There's no movement between your finger and the back of your hand. Rubbing does not cause blisters. You do not need rubbing to cause blisters. They're caused by the stretching and distortion of the skin. So it's not just about heat, moisture, and friction. The problem with this paradigm is it's so intuitive and it's so easy to understand, and it just makes intuitive sense. But we need to move past this if we really want to understand blisters better. The reason this is easy to understand is when we are exercising, our feet are wrapped up in socks and shoes. It's whether it's hot or cold, as we exercise, our feet get warm, okay? So that's the heat. That causes the moisture, which is perspiration. So our feet sweat quite a lot, and that sweat doesn't necessarily have a great opportunity to evaporate like it does on other parts of our body. And that's before we start talking about environmental moisture, like walking through wet grass, rain, stream crossings, etc. And that leads to friction. Now, the problem with friction is friction has 2 definitions, and they are more opposite than they are similar. The layman's definition of friction is rubbing, But as I said, it's not rubbing that causes friction. The definition of friction we should be using when we talk about blisters is the scientific definition, which is the force that resists rubbing. So it's the force that keeps your fingertip stuck to the back of your hand as you wobble it back and forth. Common misconceptions about blisters. They're not caused by rubbing. They're not a superficial to deep wear injury. That is what an abrasion is. So if something is rubbing your skin, it's taking off deeper and deeper layers of skin till it gets to a raw area of skin. That's what an abrasion is. It's not a blister. Your blister may end up looking like an abrasion, but the initial injury was a blister. It's a tear under the skin surface. So it's not inevitable to get blisters if your feet get hot. They're not inevitable if your feet sweat a lot. And they're definitely not inevitable in endurance activities. This is where it's so important to really know what's going on with blisters, is if you are hiking day after day, particularly if you're in the wilderness, you don't have access to medical attention. The facts around blisters. Blisters are a tear between skin layers. It happens under the skin surface. It's caused by repetitive shear distortion, and you now know what that looks like and feels like. Friction is the force that keeps the skin stationary. So in your shoe, with regard to your foot and foot blisters, friction is the force that keeps your skin stuck to the sock, which is stuck to the shoe. And of course, friction is the force that keeps your shoe stuck to the ground. We need it for traction. Friction is important. We need friction for traction. Otherwise, everything's all too slippery, slidey, and we get injuries. And our gait is inefficient. So friction keeps the skin stationary while the bones move back and forth, and soft tissue layers in between have to stretch and distort as a result. Skin cell connections tear and fluid fills that area, and it can take up to 2 hours for a blister to fully fill with fluid. So basically, if there's one thing I want you to remember about that, is friction blisters are caused by shear, not rubbing. Okay, predicting blisters. This is massively important. This is something that just gets left. No one visits this. People don't think that blisters are that predictable, but I'm going to tell you that they are. There are certain blisters that you should expect to get, and you should expect to get them, and that should make you implement prevention before you even start. Don't go waiting for a hot spot to occur. That's just like a last resort kind of a thing. So if you know, or you can predict that you're going to get a blister somewhere, put the best prevention in place in your training, but definitely before you start on day one. And you can take that blister right out of the equation. You do not need to worry about that blister location. So how do we predict them? Well, the most likely blister that you'll suffer is the blisters that you've had before. And this is the valuable blister intel that people ignore. You should expect these blisters, and you should have the best prevention in place before you even start. Yeah. The other thing that you need to know about blisters in terms of predicting them is blisters and calluses are caused by the same thing. So anywhere that you've got a callus, you should expect to get a blister there. A callus is a sign that there is repetitive shear deformation or distortion going on in that piece of skin, just day in, day out. But it's happening at a level where the skin is able to kind of adapt, and it does that by creating thicker skin, and that's what a callus is. So calluses are the chronic manifestation of repetitive shear distortion. Blisters are the acute. So if you increase your activity, all of a sudden the skin doesn't have time to adapt, and so it blisters. It does not callus. It doesn't have time to callus. Is it enough to just get rid of the callus before you head off? No, it's not. The callus is not the problem. The callus is just a sign. It is valuable blister intel that you should be looking at and implementing the best prevention before you even head off. And therefore, you could nip that blister in the bud. It won't bother you. Okay, let's have a look at prevention. There's a ton of blister prevention strategies. I wish I could have all day to explain this to you, but we don't. I will show you this slide, but I don't expect you to really take it in. But what I want to show you with this is that there's a structure that we use to implement, to understand how preventions work and to implement the right prevention for the anatomical location. So if you really want to get successful at preventing blisters, what you need to do is the first thing you need to do is identify the anatomical location. You shouldn't be thinking about blisters as a single entity that needs a single prevention and it's going to work for all blisters. That's just not the case. Blisters are initiated by bone movement within your foot, and there are different reasons for that to happen. So first things first, think I've got a blister history of getting a blister here, let's say under my big toe. I need to research what are the best preventions for blisters under the big toe, not I've got to research how to prevent blisters. You've got to hone in on the anatomical location. The other thing that people make the mistake of is they think, okay, I'm doing a multi-day hike. I've got to find out what are the best blister preventions for hiking. That's not going to get you great outcomes. You've got to start with the anatomical location first. So what is the best prevention for blisters under my big toe? Find out about all those strategies, and then you can nuance it for the specifics of your activity. So you can choose the preventions that you want to use based on the duration of your hike, what you're able to carry, what you're able to implement, the conditions, the terrain, and that kind of thing. That's how you're going to get really successful at preventing blisters. Okay, let's move on to gear. Excuse me, guys, just having a quick sip. If you ask me which products I wouldn't leave the house without if I was going on a multi-day hike in terms of prevention, it would be Engo blister patches and gel toe protectors. So we're going to talk more about those, and also we're going to talk about hydrocolloid blister plasters because they can be brilliant for one type of blister. So Engo blister patches are kind of like shiny, slippery stickers. You stick them to your shoe. They stay there for the duration, you know, not sort of days, but more like months. I've got blister patches that have been in the same shoes for a year or two. And gel toe protectors are really, really good for many reasons. When you're thinking about blister products, it's really important that you understand the pros and cons of each strategy. This is also really lacking in all conversations about blister management, but it's massively important. It's probably not really talked about because people still don't understand what blisters, even people that write about them, even academics, I'm sorry to say. Okay, Engo blister patches. So they minimize friction levels big time, no matter how sweaty your feet are, no matter how sort of clammy it is in your shoe. And the great thing about these is they reduce friction levels in a targeted way. Your foot needs a bit of traction in your shoe. So what we don't want is to reduce friction all over your whole foot because it's too slippery, and it reduces the functional efficiencies of gait and means that your shoe just can't support your foot as well. So it does it in a targeted way. They're really thin. They don't affect shoe fit. They're durable. As I said, they last weeks, months, maybe even years. They save time at the start of the day. You're not having to tape or do this or do that every day because it's already in place. It's in your shoe and ready to go. It's applicable to most blister sites. The site that it's not applicable to is blisters between your toes because there's just no part of the shoe that you can put it on that goes between your toes. And you can use them for prevention and treatment. And I'm going to show you why it's so important to implement prevention when you are treating blisters. They do have downsides though. They need to be attached to a clean, dry surface. So if your shoe is already wet, they're not going to stick. So you've got to really think ahead and put them on, particularly on those blister, those areas that you can predict blisters. If you've used lubricant or powders and it's sort of ingrained into the surface of the shoe that you want to stick the patch to, they also won't stick. Of course, they need a nice, clean area of shoe to attach to. Waterlogging can make them peel off. They're adhesive. So particularly if you've got them on the toe box protecting the top of your toes, and that shoe has a very breathable upper, like a mesh running shoe kind of thing, then water can just get through and it gets straight onto the adhesive part and makes it come unstuck. You're more likely to get through, you're more likely to have your patch stay in place if it's on the bottom of the insole, because your foot's constantly pressing it on again. And you need some care in terms of when you put your foot into your shoe when you are talking about heel patches. So back of heel blisters are really common. This is my go-to strategy for posterior heel blisters. This is my main blister area myself. If you just jam your foot into your shoe, it's likely your sock will catch the top of the patch and drag it down a little bit. And, day after day of doing that, the patch will just become unstuck. So you do need to be a little bit careful when you are using heel patches. Gel toe protectors, they absorb shear like nothing else can. So you know how when you felt shear on the back of your hand, that's the stretching and distortion within the soft tissues of your hand. Well, the gel itself undergoes that same shear deformation. So if there's an external material that's undergoing shear, it means there's less shear that needs to happen within your skin. They cushion really well also, and they're almost always comfortable because they're kind of soft and pliable. However, they do have significant downsides. The first one is that they can cause maceration. Your sweat can't evaporate, and any fluids that are coming from your blisters also can't evaporate. It won't absorb it. What it'll do is it'll just make the skin more soggy. So for that reason, I recommend that you use these only for prevention. Some people do use them with treatment, but you've got to have a dressing on the blister first. Don't get a blister and then whack a gel toe sleeve on, and it's just going to make a bad situation way worse. So a dressing first, because you need something to absorb the fluids from that blister. They're also quite bulky, so you can't, they come in different sort of thicknesses, the gel. The thicker it is, the more protection you've got, but the more room it takes up. And so you generally can't fit more than one per foot because the toe box is just too restrictive. Hydrocolloids. Compeed is an example of a hydrocolloid blister plaster. They are brilliant for accelerating the healing of de-roofed blisters. De-roofed blisters are those blisters that no longer have a roof. It's just a raw patch of tender skin that is weeping. Hydrocolloids are waterproof, which is brilliant. They last for days, so you don't sort of change them every day if you can get away with it. If you're needing to change it more than once a day, then you'd probably just use a Band-Aid, which is an island dressing. And when it stops weeping so much, then get into a hydrocolloid. It's easy to know when to change a hydrocolloid because as the fluids from the blister are released from the skin, they combine with the hydrocolloid particles, and that causes a gel, and that gel is visible from the outside of the plaster. So you can see this white bubble kind of thing, and it gets bigger and bigger as the blister releases more fluids. And when that gel bubble gets to the edge of the plaster, that's when you need to change it, because that gel bubble means the plaster isn't stuck to the skin there. And so if that gets to the edge, that's an entry route for bacteria into your blister. So you need to change it before that point. And they come in 3 different shapes and sizes, which is really handy. Downsides. The edges can peel. When you think about your foot, it's sweating a lot. And plus you're sort of onning and offing with socks. So it's quite easy for a tiny little edge of the plaster to lift, and that'll stick like glue to your sock and you won't be able to get it out. So for that reason, and just to increase the longevity of the plaster, you need to put fixation tape around the plaster. going back, so you can see this is the white fixation tape. Fixamol is an example. With our brand of hydrocolloids, we include these fixation tapes. So they're custom cut for the size and shape of plaster that you've got. We also have them individually wrapped and sterile. Now, this is what brings Compeed down, is these are for de-roofed blisters only, right? That's a blister that can easily get infected. So you should only be putting sterile products on that blister. And yet Compeed aren't sterile. So, you know, especially when you're out in the wilderness, and if infection occurs, it's really going to bring you undone. So sterile, they must be sterile. It's important to know that when you change that dressing, it's going to smell bad and it's going to look gooey, and people freak out when that happens. So a lot of hydrocolloids don't really set expectations very well around dressing changes and what is normal. In ours, we go to great lengths to spell that out. And as I said, they're not for prevention. So you should not use hydrocolloids on an intact blister or a torn blister, because if you do, as you peel that hydrocolloid off the skin, it's going to rip the blister roof off, and then you've just got a worse situation than you started with. You should also not use them for prevention in endurance activities. Now, if you were just sort of, you know, normal daily activities, you might get away with a Compeed or any hydrocolloid for blister prevention. However, when you are partaking in endurance activities, the hydrocolloid just can't prevent blisters as much as you think they can, because it's not that we're reducing the rubbing. Shear still happens under that hydrocolloid. And so then you end up with a blister under your hydrocolloid. And as I said, when you remove that plaster, it's going to take the blister roof right off. Blister kits. The best laid plans are of little use if you don't have the tools to implement them. So you need to gather the gear that you'll need and keep it all in one place, which is your blister kit. You don't need a blister kit. You can just bung a few things in with your first aid kit. But if you want a really good blister kit, we have 3. Really, for a multi-day hike, it's the Ultra Blister kit that you need. I'll show you what's in there. We've got 24 island dressings. Island dressings is just a fancy way of saying band-aids. We've got 6 of the hydrocolloids. We've got felt for donut pads, Pour-On for donut pads, or just cushioning like between the toes or wherever you need it. We've got adhesive enhancer for if you need to stick things when your skin is wet, or when your shoe is wet, and you can make sure that it's going to stay stuck. Antiseptic, some sterile cotton wool balls and buds, hypodermic needles and scalpel blades for lancing blisters or drilling through a toenail. Sounds terrible. It's really easy. Doesn't hurt as much as you think, especially if you use one of these. Gel toe protectors. We've got 3 of those. We've got a Engo 6-pack. So that's 4 of the large ovals, 2 of the small ovals, a pair of gloves, and a meter of Fixamol. So there's a ton of stuff in there that really is quite necessary. I built this on the back of the 6-day continuous ultra marathons that I go to, because people just turn up with 3 band-aids, a cotton wool ball, and, you know, not much at all. And if you get a blister on day 1 or 2, and we know that that's when it's most likely, you need to be treating that blister for the duration. Right, let's get into treatment. Here's what I want you to know. This is massively important. Blister treatment has to include blister prevention. Too often people just do first aid and think the job is done. First aid is important. It's all around infection prevention. That is betadine and a Band-Aid, essentially. Some sort of antiseptic or antibiotic if you're in the US, and an island dressing, which is just like a Band-Aid. That is important, but it's just blister first aid. You actually have to implement the prevention as well. And that's because the prevention is the thing that gets rid of the blister causing forces. So if you don't want your blister to get worse as you keep walking, if you want it to not hurt so much, you've got to implement the prevention. And that is what makes meaningful blister treatment. You've got to give your blister some sort of momentum in healing, and it is possible to for your blister to gather momentum in terms of healing while you continue to walk on it, but it has to include a really good prevention. So it's all about prevention. Okay, let's go through this. This is the 5 stages of blister management. This just gives you a really good overview of from go to woe in terms of prevention. So the aim is to start and finish with no blister. To do that, you need to do a bit of research beforehand. You need to find out the best preventions for the blisters that you expect to get. If you don't manage to do that, then your last chance of blister prevention is the hotspot stage. Now, the hotspot stage doesn't last very long, and it can be subtle. So you can miss it, and it's easy to ignore. You know, you've got pressures of walking with other people. You know, you're in the zone. You don't want to stop everyone. It's just so all too easy to not take advantage of the hotspot stage, or just to miss it altogether. So let's say you miss the prevention boat because you don't stop at the hotspot, then you've got a blister with his roof intact. Now, the good thing about this blister is it can't get infected if you leave that blister roof intact. So the aim of the game is to leave it intact. And the way that you manage that is you put a Band-Aid over it, i.e. an island dressing, and you implement the prevention plan that you have for this blister location. Because remember, the Band-Aid isn't enough. You need to get rid of the blister causing forces. Yes, Band-Aids will stop things rubbing the blister, but remember, blisters aren't caused by rubbing, and all those blister forces are still occurring underneath the Band-Aid. So you need to implement the best prevention that you can muster to keep that roof intact. Let's say you're unable to do that, then the next thing that happens is your blister roof tears. Now, the bad thing about this one is now the blister's open to infection, so we need to add infection prevention. That is essentially betadine. So it's betadine and antiseptic, antiseptic and an island dressing, i.e. betadine and a Band-Aid, and plus your prevention, because we want this blister to stop hurting and to start healing and to not get worse. Let's say you don't do that well enough, you end up with a D-roof blister. So the roof of the blister rubs right off and you're left with a raw, weepy blister base. Again, it's open to infection, so we need to put the betadine or antiseptic on. You can put an island dressing on this, but these are the blisters that you can put a hydrocolloid on. And hydrocolloids, we've gone through the advantages of those. So let's say you put some antiseptic on there, you put the hydrocolloid on, and again, you need to implement the prevention that ideally you would have had in the first place so that you could have stayed at stage 1. And that is the thing that is going to make your blister hurt less and to not get worse and to gather momentum in terms of healing. Does that make sense? Now, everyone wants to know about popping blisters. And there are pros and cons to popping blisters. I'm not afraid to pop blisters. I do a lot of that at the Australian 6-day ultra marathon, because what we know is that if you ignore a blister and you carry on, it's probably going to pop on its own inside your shoe, which is a germy environment. So sometimes it can be a good idea to take the bull by the horns and open that blister in a controlled environment, give it the right treatment to prevent infection, and chances are you'll be fine. But yes, you do need to understand that you are opening the blister up to infection. When wouldn't you lance a blister? I would not advise you lancing a blister if you don't have the gear to do it, like the scalpel blade or the hypodermic needle, plus the antiseptic, plus the dressings. If you don't have enough of that gear, you need to treat that blister for the duration. That's going to be at least days, okay? It's not going to be one episode of treatment, job done. The other thing that you don't want to do is leave a soggy Band-Aid on a blister, because you'll get maceration. So in terms of multi-day hiking, you'd be changing it at least twice a day. So you need to have the gear and you need to have enough of it. I wouldn't lance a blister if you don't have sterile implements to do it with. Don't lance it if you don't know how to use the gear. You probably don't want to lance it if you are afraid to pierce the skin. Some people just get the heebie-jeebies about that. It doesn't hurt to lance a blister, by the way. that skin doesn't have nerve endings in it. You don't have to push or pull or squash or squeeze or anything like that. It is literally, you just put a little bit of a hole in the blister and then you encourage the fluid to come out. I've got a ton of videos if you want to watch some of those. And the last one I mentioned. So yes, blisters, you can pop them if you have the gear, if it's sterile, if you know how to use it, you're not afraid to use it, and you have enough gear for the duration. All right, here we go, getting into the last bit. I'm pleased to say that you can beat the hiking blister odds, but you've got to be over prepared, not under prepared. And remember, if your aim is to pack ultralight, the more prevention you have in place at the start, the less you have to carry with you. So the more prevention, the better, essentially. Now, if this is all kind of news to you, if you're only successful some of the time at preventing blisters, if you don't really know why the preventions you've used to date haven't worked, or if you're blister prone and you feel like you've tried everything, if you think that blisters are unpredictable, if you feel that there's an inevitability about blisters and you've just given into that, if you find that blisters are taking the fun out of your hiking or even just your everyday life, if you want to help others with blisters, or if you just want to understand blisters more for the sake of your own feet so that you're not going to be bothered with blisters in your upcoming hike, then there are 3 things that I think that you can do. So you can go to the Blister Prevention website. That's www.blister-prevention.com. There's a lot of free information there. We've also got an online store. You can buy one of those kits that I showed you. You can buy individual products for whatever blister that you need to prevent, or you can just compile, you can buy a few things and compile your own kit. Or you can also go to Fix My Foot Blisters Fast. Now, this is a fast action program that I developed after helping people all around the world via email who would contact me about, you know, their troubles with blisters. And it just became really obvious that this was needed. And it was really easy to do because I do it in a way where I just ask you a few questions and I take you straight to the information that you need to know. So there's pictures, there's short videos, there's not a lot of text, but it gives you the information that you need to know without having to sift through all the stuff that you don't need to know. So if you're pushed for time, if you don't really have time to research blisters, then this is definitely the thing for you. Now, before you go ahead and join Fix My Foot Blisters Fast or buy anything from my website, I want to let you know that Susan and I have come up with a blister bundle offer for you guys. And what that includes is the Fix My Foot Blisters Fast course. So that includes everything that we've talked about today. But the bit that we didn't really have time to talk about is the blister prevention per anatomical site. So all the areas that you can get blisters on your feet, I go through each of those. I tell you the reasons behind those blisters and tell you the best preventions for those blisters, because there's not one prevention that is good for every blister site. And I also go through all the blister gear, like I did with the Engo patches and the gel toe sleeves and the hydrocolloids. I give you my honest and impartial opinion about their pros and cons. I show you how they work and how they don't work. So you can make informed decisions basically on what you want to take with you and implement before you even go. Plus, you get the Ultra Blister Kit. I showed you what was in here. As I said, this is what I've made off the back of the 6-day ultra marathons that I go to. So there's a ton of stuff in there. You can take the whole thing. You can just take certain components. It's really up to you. So Fix My Foot Blisters Fast, you get lifetime access to that. That's a $300 course. The Ultra Blister Kit is $120. So that's $420 worth of stuff. But for this webinar, if you're watching live or if you are also watching the replay, for the hiking club audience, you can get this for $245. Now, you need to use a special link to get that. and Susan might pop that in the chat. Now, Susan, we didn't have time to go through that earlier. Do you have that link?
Yeah, what I'll do is I'll send it in an email to everybody so that they can go on and access the special bundle.
Great. Thanks for that, Susan.
No worries.
What's the currency for the special? Is it US dollars or is it something else? Sorry.
It'll be Australian dollars if you're in Australia or New Zealand, and US dollars if you're anywhere else.
Okay. But are they equal? It's 245 and 245, or do I need to convert that from 245 Australian dollars?
It'll be 245 in whatever currency.
Okay.
Just the way we had to set it up.
Okay, that's fine.
But usually the blister kit is 120 in both currencies, and Fix My Foot Blisters Fast is usually 300 US.
Okay.
If you're buying it separately. So yeah, that basically wraps things up, guys. We've gone through some stats and facts about blisters, what really causes blisters. I hope that you remember that. They're caused by shear, not rubbing. We've looked at predicting blisters, massively important. If you just ignore that intel, you're really not trying. So think back to any blister you've ever had before and just take it out of the equation by implementing the best prevention. We've looked at a few blister prevention strategies. We've looked at what it is to implement meaningful blister treatment. And we've gone through a few items that you could consider putting in your packs. So that's it. I will hand over to Susan, and she's got some things to say, I think, and I'll be happy to take your questions.
Yes, let me jump back in. All right, let's see here. All right, well, Rebecca, we've been now talking for the last few months, and I've learned so much about blister prevention. And to everybody that's going to be watching this, I have also gone through the Fix My Feet Fast. And I think it's really important as we're all starting our training or in our training for our upcoming hike. I'm going to be doing the Altavia 1 in June, and I'm doing it over 5 days. So it's going to be a pretty compressed trip. And so my training hikes on the weekend and training runs, etc., mean that my feet are getting some more attention than they usually would. And so don't wait until you're actually on the hike. As Rebecca said, all of the training that we put into being ready for our hike is super important to understand our feet. And there are some things that Rebecca said in the presentation and in the past to me that has really resonated. It's about learning your feet. And I think that that was one thing that's not just waiting for a blister to happen and then know how to treat it, actually being able to understand your feet are unique to you and what can you do to prevent it. And then those magic blue angio patches, they have entered my life. And I would say that that's something that I didn't know existed before and is a great way to be able to treat those specific sites for your feet. So it's, yeah, I'm so glad to have this relationship with Rebecca. She's taught us so much, and I'm excited to be able to pass on the blister bundle to all of our community. So enjoy, and I hope that you too can prevent your blisters while you're on your multi-day hike, because it really can help the whole trip be more enjoyable. So thank you, Rebecca.
Pleasure.
Can I ask 2 quick questions?
Yep, I've got a few more things, Elaine, and then we can jump into it. Fantastic. This is part of a series of webinars. So our next one will be happening next week, next Friday or Thursday, depending which time zone you're in. We're going to be talking about how to sustain energy on a multi-day hike. So we're going to have Dr. Andreas Ramonas. He's a doctor of sports medicine, a PhD in exercise physiology and sports nutrition, and also owner of Roam Energy. We're going to be talking about how to really sustain energy through a multi-day hike. So everything you need to know on what type of fuel sources, how frequently, when you need to be taking or eating different things, and also understanding while you're in the Alps, it's different to when you're training at home. So join us. You can register for free at www.thehiking.club/events. And again, like similar to today, if you can't attend live, then we'll also be sending the recording within 24 hours. The next exciting thing is that this week we're going to be opening registration for our 2024 Trail Ambassador Program. So last year we had 35 Trail Ambassadors across Tour de Mont Blanc, Walker's Haut Route, and Tour of Monte Rosa. And each day they shared trip reports and trail conditions for what to expect on the trail. So everything from snow conditions to when bridges were installed, to if there were any detours on the trail. And so this year we're extending it to 5 different trails. So Tour de Mont Blanc, Walker's Haut Route, Tour of Monte Rosa, Alta Via 1 in the Dolomites, and Bernese Oberland. So we're looking for 100 trail ambassadors to help share those updates with our 10,000 plus hiking club community members. And you'll also, in return for providing those daily updates, you will receive a goodie bag or a swag kit from the hiking club and also our sponsors, so such as Blister Prevention. So you can apply now. I'll be also sending this registration link in the email. It hasn't officially opened yet, but you can jump on and be the first to apply, which is, yeah, very exciting. So with that, thank you so much for listening in if you are watching later, and thank you for those that joined live. And Rebecca, I think you said you have some time for questions. Great. So Elaine, I'll pass it over to you.
Yep. I just had 2 quick questions. One was those Engo patches, they look like they might be difficult to apply on the inside, like at the toe box area. Just, I could see that if they're not flat and smooth, they could actually end up, irritating your toe or your foot in some way. Are they really made for only like heel maybe in the bottom flat part of the insole area, or?
No, you can literally put them anywhere on the shoe. The initial adhesion is the most important thing. So if you don't get a good initial adhesion, if you just sort of like slap it on and say that'll be right, then it's probably not going to work, and you'll find edges will peel back. But as long as you hold it on nice and firm for a good 30 seconds, particularly around the edges, to make sure you've got a good initial adhesion on those, we recommend that you wear them for the 30 minutes immediately after you apply them, because that puts a bit of functional pressure and warmth on the patch to make them stick better. Then they're fine. But yeah, when you talk about the top of the toe box, if it's a mesh upper, the main reason that they'll come unstuck is water getting through the top of the shoe. But everywhere else, you don't have that problem so much.
Mine's more on the inside edge of the, like on the side of your big toes.
Right. So yeah. So when we're talking about edge blisters, it's tricky to get into that part of the shoe. Okay. Yes. So that's that. Yeah. Got to get the laces out, really open it up as much as you can. A good idea if you're putting patches up in the toe area is to put your shoe on and just feel for the spot and put a bit of tape or a little pen mark where you've got to get it. So that'll help you when you get your foot out and you're actually placing the patch. The other thing that you can do is, especially for edge blisters, you need to have a patch on the horizontal insole surface and the vertical shoe surface, because edge blisters are caused by that very edge. So we need to make a nice smooth contour. You don't want to have the same patch on both surfaces, because that will cause creases. It means that you can't take the insole out. So the best thing about that is you take the insole out, you size up where you need the patch, you put the patch on your insole, you put the insole back in the shoe, sort of mark on the outside of your shoe where you've got to get the shoe patch part, and then take the insole out and then put the patch in. It's tricky in that part of the shoe, there's no doubt.
That's what I was wondering, is because the crease part, I'm thinking if you put it in, you make a crease, then the crease is going to be now rubbing against your toe, right?
Yeah, okay. The oval patches are the best for that. They're the least likely to crease. And you can cut the patches if you need them smaller, or whatever. You can customize them to whatever shape and size you need.
I think the hard part on my boot is that even if you take the laces out, it's a waterproof boot. The tongue is gusseted.
Yeah.
So you can't peel the tongue back the whole way and like look inside the toe box of the shoe.
Yeah.
Okay, that was one question. The next question is, how much availability? I'm sure probably in Chamonix there might be, in Courmayeur, but how much availability is there for first aid items for the Yeah, you know? Okay.
Yeah, I was gonna,
Yeah,
I was going to say I can help to take this one. So, Elaine, are you doing Tour de Mont Blanc?
Tour de Mont Blanc, yep.
Yeah. So trails like Tour de Mont Blanc are lucky because they go through villages. So at least every 2 days, you'll be going through a village, and all of the villages along Tour de Mont Blanc, so Les Contamines, Courmayeur, Le Chapieux, they all have little
Pharmacy.
shops. Yeah. And,
Okay.
you know, so many hikers come through that they will have the equipment there. And so you'll be fine for every 2 days. But I think, as Rebecca was saying, like bringing some basic things are going to be super important, because in those first 2 or 3 days of hiking, you're most likely to get your blisters, and you don't want to have waited then until your first village. There are some trails more like Alta Via 1 where you don't go through villages. And so for people that are hiking more remote trails, you're going to want to pack in some extra things. And I think, to Rebecca's point, like if you know where you're more likely to get blisters, bring the gear that will help you for that specific type of blister is going to help, because you can't guarantee that the shop is going to have that specific type of gear.
Okay, thank you.
No worries. All right. Well, I think, Valerie, do you have a question that you'd like to ask Rebecca? Okay. Well, I think we'll finish up there. So again, thank you so much, Rebecca. Fantastic presentation. And for those people, love my blister pod, get it. I think it'll really help you prepare for what gear you need to take with you, so that when you're on the trail, you're going to have hopefully no blisters, and make sure that those feet are going to get you from A to B. So thank you so much, and thanks for joining.
Thank you. Bye for now.
Bye.